Hello, hello, hello. I'm trying to find, okay. So as everyone trickles in, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Brian Peel. I'm the president and founder of the Estate Managers Coalition. We are 10 years plus strong right now, and super excited because none of that would be possible without everyone on here and your support. So we're extremely grateful, and we like to start off the master classes with gratitude to everybody out there who has played a part in the growth of the Estate Managers Coalition and continued to support it for all these years. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you guys so much for everything. I also just want to take a minute because I'm usually really bad at remembering all of this stuff, but I just got a reminder on my phone that it is daylight savings time. So be sure to get your clocks back tonight. So that's always a nice reminder, especially if you have an appointment in the morning that you have to be at. But of course, in the pandemic, not many of us have had appointments unless they're on Zoom. But just wanted to throw that out there and remind everyone it is daylight savings time. So be sure to set your clocks back tonight. Also, it takes a lot of people to put the master classes together. And I just want to take a minute to thank two of those people that are on here today. Gary Gray, who obviously sends you guys your emails every month. And Gary, we're super, indebted to you for your tireless efforts. Gary will also be hosting today because Joe Weber, the other person on here that I want to give a shout out to and throw some gratitude her way, because she usually heads up the master classes, but she had an emergency at her house with a water tank exploding. And so she's here in audio, but not in video. But Gary, I just want to take a minute because you obviously have a service that you provide to estate managers throughout the Southern California area. And I just wanted to take a minute to introduce your service and give you that opportunity so you can tell everyone a little bit about what that is.
Thank you very much, Brian. I have a business. I provide concierge technology support to all of you and your principals and associates and things like that. Covers everything from managing cloud accounts and making sure all your data is backed up, to your passwords are secure, to setting up email, to managing corporate staff for devices so a nanny can't steal an iPhone and things of that nature, and really kind of troubleshoot all the esoteric issues that our principals find themselves in technology. So that's my pitch.
Which is kind of like a nice little dovetail with the master class and who we have joining us today. And I also just want to say that it's true what everyone has heard, because everyone's been texting me and emailing. Brian, is it really true? There's like $50,000 in prizes given away today. Yes, yes, it's all true. But you have to be present to win, so you got to stay for the class. And, I just want to give a big shout out to Profound Technologies, because you guys have been awesome since you joined. And I think I speak for every estate manager or private service professional when I say that inevitably it's always 5 o'clock on a Friday when something goes wrong with the AV system, with the smart home technology. And anyone on here knows you're only as good as your AV supplier and your tech support. So without further ado, and with that being said, I want to, really thank you guys at Profound Technologies for seeing the opportunity and joining forces with EMC. And we're super grateful to have you guys here, and thank you for your support and for all these wonderful prizes that you guys donated today to be given away. And we're looking forward to hearing how you guys are the solution. And it's been a long time coming. So thank you guys for joining us. And without further ado, I will hand it back over to you, Gary. And thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Absolutely. So just a quick overview on Profound Technologies. They cover both coasts for our New York members and our Southern California members. They are a phenomenal resource for all your AV technology needs. And certainly Brad at Profound can describe their services much better than I can. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Brad.
Thank you so much, Gary. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we get a chance to give you some additional knowledge today on technology in general. But as said, my name is Brad Fisher. I'm out of our Southern California office.
And my name's Kevin Buzza. I'm out of our Philadelphia office. We support New York City and also Philadelphia. And a couple interesting facts to start us off. One is that we've been in business 20 years. We're celebrating that this January. And then two is, like Brian said, we might be able to do the 50,000 in prize. We're going to convert the webinar to an NFT. And I think Brian and Gary said they were going to bid it up to 50,000 and we would split that money with the participants.
I like the plan.
So as Kevin said, we started business about 20 years ago. In fact, my brother and I initially started the business. Kevin joined us shortly after the start. And at that time, my brother and I had worked for a company by the name of AMX. Some of you have probably heard of that, especially those who have been around longer. AMX at the time was kind of the behemoth in the control industry. And it was probably what we saw in replacement of what a typical Crestron system would be these days. And our job roles when we were working there were high-level engineers, technical trainers, salespeople, and then as well, of course, programmers as well. My brother was a real high-level programmer for them. And we learned in that process, especially while we were training a lot of the integrators that were coming through, was that there was a real deficiency for programming. And the programming was a really critical area. So we found that a lot of the systems that were designed were really mediocre at best.
Yeah, mediocre for sure. And one of the things that was great about the early point in our history is that Brad and I literally spent weeks on a plane traveling across the country to some of the most impressive estate homes, palatial estate homes with very complex technology needs. We met many of the integrators throughout the country, many of which are on the CE Pro, top 50, top 100. And we learned a ton. I think at one point we stopped counting at about 1,500 estate homes that we had done. And through that process, we were able to integrate a lot of learning and accelerate far beyond what a lot of other systems integrators are capable of.
Yeah. In fact, that brings back some nightmares, to be honest, sleeping in some Motel 6s for some of our trips, which was never fun. But yeah, we had a lot of driving around the country, flying around the country. So we started this business really as a programming firm initially, because that was really a big area that we saw that was a need. We found that the typical residential AV dealer had a lot of shortfalls in the area of programming. Either they had somebody who was practicing because they just didn't do enough jobs, or they just simply weren't a programmer. And we could talk more about that as we kind of go. But ultimately, through this process, it led us to kicking off the company that we're talking to today, which is Profound Technologies. And the full integration firm of us doing everything.
So let's get into what we're going to be talking about today, the real problem. I just want the system to work.
I just want it to be stupid simple.
I'm not technical at all.
I don't need the Ferrari of technology.
This concept, I just want to push a button and have it work. What we're talking about here is we think that just wanting it to work is not enough. And oftentimes, that concept is because someone had a bad experience. And so we think that we want to raise the bar and talk about how good it could actually be when it's put together properly.
Yeah, I mean, what we find is that, of course, all of these statements are really come from past pain. A lot of people are flexing their muscles, talking about all the technical equipment they install and how cool and complicated it is. But at the end of the day, the customer doesn't care about the black boxes that get installed in the rack. They really just frankly care about how easy it is to use.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about, why it is that it doesn't work well, and then show you how we make that work for you.
And sneak peek, it's often because it's simply not engineered correctly in the first place.
So getting to the complete and comprehensive approach that we have this concept, and it's present in our design guide, which we can send out to anyone that's interested, of the triad of technology. And it's this concept that we bring to bear the best with system design and engineering. We put a lot of time into user interface, and we're going to talk a little bit about our history in becoming experts and continuing that expertise in user interface design. And then we support our systems with a comprehensive approach to the network. This makes all the difference.
It really does. And we're going to talk a lot about how you, as the estate manager, manage your estates. Really, when it fails, of course, at 2 a.m. in the morning, as was explained before, or Friday night, when something big is happening. So we have systems that are really designed with the estate manager in mind.
Great. So moving on, complete and comprehensive support and remote management. One of the things that we think is important, kind of begin with the end in mind, is the idea that we provide a comprehensive managed services offering. We're talking about network monitoring, 24/7 ticketing, proactive triage of any technology issues that come to bear, which we're going to touch on that as we continue. When we say all inclusive, what we're saying is we provide the full stack of solutions. When I mentioned earlier, Brad, in my history, it was a lot about learning how many integrators are understaffed, because that profile is maybe a 3 to 5 person organization, and therefore they can't provide the full stack of solutions, beginning with the design and engineering, continuing with the system documentation, having the programming capability, being able to deliver on the promises of the design and then support it through to the end. So we think these are the important concepts of a complete and comprehensive support, but also, and maybe more importantly, this concept of being able to fit to your need. We have design standards. We operate in an enterprise approach, which we're going to explain more, but we leave room always for the customer and what they might challenge us or ask us to do to customize the system to make it their own.
Yeah, so let's dive into this. Why does technology not work well? As I mentioned earlier, we came from a technical background, from technical trainers and programmers and engineers. And as a programming firm originally, we got subcontracted by about 400 AV companies throughout the US. And as Kevin mentioned, some of the biggest companies out there that existed, that's what we did for them. So what we found is that there's some commonalities between a lot of the residential dealers. And there was also a major difference between the residential dealers and the commercial dealers. The unfortunate part is the residential dealer typically, and I think you probably will see this in some of the experiences you've had, but typically tend to be a really smart owner who then in return has hired a handful of high school grads who maybe went on to work for a car audio company installing speakers because they had an interest in that. And that led them into doing home audio video. And it's really a big difference between in the commercial industry, they're hiring engineers, they're hiring true programmers and true software developers. So there was a really big difference between the two.
Yeah, a huge difference. And we'll maybe continue to talk about our commercial experience as we go. But at Profound, we do commercial and government work as well. I'm out of our East office. We support both residential estate homes and government commercial from New England down to Northern Virginia. Gives us a lot of exposure. Getting back to what Brad was saying about the typical integrator in this industry, they're a small shop. They stick with what, in this case, the industry trade group, some of you may not be familiar with it, it's called CEDIA, has to offer. And then these companies tend to gravitate towards simple solutions, which simple solutions, and I mean kind of out of the box simple, are elegant in one way, but then also limited, particularly for the estate home, which doesn't function like a 3-bedroom household, but functions very much like a custom commercial application. And so what we do is we solve those problems, and we can address those problems because we're aware of it from our additional expertise and enterprise capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, we like to actually use, an example when we talk about this is our customers versus others. When you talk about that cookie cutter type solution is the car example, for example. So when most people go in to buy a car, they maybe, let's just say we're comparing it to the Honda example. You have very limited choices. You've got 4 colors and you've got cloth seats or leather seats, maybe 2 choices of leather and basic stereo or an advanced stereo, just very limited. And what we find is that that's not our typical customer. And some customers, that's what they want, and that works. In the application of our customers, they tend to be people who maybe want a little bit of a better finish. They want the upgraded engine. They want better safety features. They want the ceramic brakes. They want the, the ostrich leather. There's a number of options that kind of go beyond.
Yeah, and so continuing with that concept, and I think the car metaphor is a useful one, although we're talking about home technology today. But when you talk about the high performance experience and you kind of think about what brought us to that point in the case of a car, it comes back to almost this triad that we talk about. The user interface, again, is one of the 3 concepts that we really invest heavily in. When you get into a car, one of the most important concepts is the dashboard, which is this way of really understanding natively when you sit down in your friend's car, for example, how it works. That's a key component for us. the network and the infrastructure, network problems can be tragic when it comes to home systems, but a good network is like an open road for this high performance vehicle. And then finally, that design and engineering is that ability to trust, when you go to experience that performance and challenge the system, that you're going to get what you expect.
Yeah, and then of course, in that same experience, you come to the whole idea of the reason that a lot of people end up buying the Mercedes AMG is because of the experience they get through that process, because of the way they get treated, because of the white glove service that they end up attaining as well.
So I think it's important to say with that, we're not into cookie cutter. We joke, me and Brad, there's a place for cookie cutters in the kitchen around the holidays, the wreath, the ornament, this sort of thing. But as it relates to, universal remote, which is a technology within, AV, which is very cookie cutter, Control4, even Savant, and we can talk about that. We don't go to that because we want to be able to really tailor the experience and use the technologies that allow us to, have the most options and the most high performance.
Yeah, and it always reminds me of like the typical, AMX in the past when I worked for them, as well as Crestron and a lot of the companies like Control4 and Savant. They're trying to create solutions that are easier to program because there's a deficiency on the front end of the quality and the level of the integrator that's putting it in, of the ability to be able to engineer it appropriately, ability to be able to program it. And so that ultimately then ends up limiting the end user and the end result and the intuitiveness and all of that kind of stuff as well. So the one biggest issue that we tend to find in our industry is that there's no real way to differentiate who we are versus who some of the other guys are. And so that's always a difficult thing for us. We always like to say there needs to really be a new nomenclature. I mean, we all have scenarios today where we deal with, home automation technology, and home automation can mean a lot of things. Anymore can mean the, Amazon Alexa that we have, the Siri on our phone, the Google Home, but it also can mean Control4. It can mean Savant. It can mean, Vantage. It can mean, of course, all the way up to Crestron, which tends to be a little bit more of the higher end side of it. So, we really want to try to differentiate that difference between us.
Yeah, and I think we'll keep coming back to enterprise. We'll explain a few particular examples as it relates to technology platforms that we're working with and that we're going to bring into our designs. The enterprise level technology is something that's core to Profound. That's why when we say Profound Simple, which is one of our catchphrases, which we're not going to get into today, but it's this idea of really committing ourselves to driving towards simplicity and using those top enterprise technologies.
Yeah, so just to finalize and recap on kind of what we just went over there, why do systems not work well? Well, they don't work well because they're improperly engineered. They don't work well because they oftentimes are improperly installed, and they don't work well because mostly they're improperly programmed. So then what differentiates us? What's our approach to high-end residential?
Yeah, so it's how we design hardware, looking for the best products for the job. In our history, we've maintained very close relationships with our manufacturer partners. There's a few on the commercial side that I think are worth noting, such as Microsoft and Zoom, which, a side note, if in the process of post-COVID, you're looking for a production level studio for presentation or a Zoom meeting, that's also something that we at Profound Technologies can bring to you. We're one of only 2 gold certified integrators for Zoom in the country. We have access to the office of the CIO and can bring that kind of collaboration technology to bear in the estate home, studio level quality. But then talking generally about hardware in that process, we maintain very close relationships, I'll just mention too, with Crestron and Lutron Electronics. In the case of Crestron, we're on their beta testing team. When Crestron released its commercial lighting platform, it was me and Brad in their first class to come up with the CLC designation. Then after that, we worked directly with the factory to commission smart buildings, both on commercial and lighting, commercial and residential throughout the country. And then as it relates to Lutron, when it released one of its more recent platforms, we wrote the interface programming for that platform so that both Crestron and other interfaces could control it. So this concept is that we challenge ourselves to know the hardware deeply, to work and support the manufacturers. And this allows us to kind of feed this virtual loop where we're able to support what's coming out and provide that peace of mind to our customers.
Yeah, and it brings to mind in the residential world, of course, Kaleidoscape is a big brand that everybody I'm sure has seen in their homes. And that's one of those products that, again, we probably had the first Kaleidoscape in our office to write the module for that originally. And Kevin had touched a little bit on conference room technology and things of that sort in Zoom. One of the other really big areas with COVID times right now is the fact that a lot of our end users are working from home. And so we end up installing a lot of these commercial conference room type solutions in their home office as well. So one of the things that we really find is that most AV companies know what they know, and that's what they sell you. They're not oftentimes designing or engineering. They're designing and engineering based on what they make the most money on, or what their typical go-to product is that they install every day and they know really well. And that's just, in my mind, not the best way to go about it. We're always on the cutting edge of what is the latest in technology, testing it to verify that it works well, and then making sure that we can introduce that to our customer.
Yeah, so we do have some go-to products, and that'll be something we have no shame in. We think that after years of testing and refining, that we can do that and offer that as a value. But as I mentioned earlier, part of being a good technology partner, which I'll explain more later what we mean when we say technology partner, is being challenged by our customer, what they already have, what they're sitting with from when they purchased that estate home or took it over, or a technology that we're just going to have to work with. And I think that's where it's important to know that we can work with that too, to make sure that we make the system usable and collaborate with our end user.
Yeah, and then reverting back to even just a touch on our past experience with commercial, another area to really consider is that many of the estates that we work in really are commercial estates. They're large behemoth properties. I've got properties that we work in that are 120,000 square foot homes. It's just insane how large they get, and these are commercial estates. Really anything that starts to get kind of above the 18,000, 15,000 square foot range is really a desire to have commercial products installed in it in order to be able to have a reliability factor and to be able to handle that application. Residential products are typically not designed for that. So we really are focused on trying to make sure the right products are put in place. And by the way, commercial products typically end up being cheaper, and they are definitely more reliable.
Yeah, so moving on to design and interfaces. We have our engineers and our programmers. That's what we are at the core. As we mentioned, we've done really thousands of systems. And so we have that experience of refining that dashboard. That term dashboard, I use it in the car metaphor, but at Infocom, which is now called Avixa, a lot of terms here, but a top industry trade group on the commercial side, we actually sat in a group called Dashboard for Controls and challenge ourselves as thought leaders in the industry on how to make the user interface flow very intuitively for the users. This is something that I think present day, being able to download any app and really have that 1 or 2 clicks, we may somewhat take for granted, but earlier in the industry, 10, 15 years ago, this was cutting edge stuff, and being part of that conversation then is just continuing to accrue value now, even though things are further along in general. It helps us, and you'll see this when we do our demo. So you can see in commercial, using commercial approach as an example, when a commercial user interface design is put together for a network operations center, for example, that we've done on the government commercial side, that has to be designed in a way so that any person generally can walk into that room and understand it. And that's what we challenge ourselves to do. We challenge ourselves to make these user interfaces so that they're naturally intuitive to you, but anyone that walks into your estate home can also be able to use the system without a user manual.
Yeah, that's always the challenge for sure. There's so many different users in a home that are touching things. And again, that goes back to that commercial experience where there's tons of different people walking into a conference room and a boardroom that are going to handle things differently about how they want to operate that system. So touching on some of the programming things that we tend to see as well, which is another really key area of how the system tends to be really problematic. So the systems tend to get programmed by a technical person. So the technical geek type, we've always seen them, the guy that shows up at the job that's sitting on the couch and programming away. And this means the system oftentimes tends to be over-engineered. It's really designed for an engineer's mind.
Yeah, and this can be deceiving and very frustrating, actually, because the programmer likes to flex the programming muscles. And I get it. We have a lot of good programmers here, but we have a very useful system and how our team works together that helps mitigate some of those challenges. But let's just say in general, kind of the stereotype of the programmer left to their own devices will make things very complicated, much more complicated than it's needed to be. And so we try to step in and say, wait, no, this principal of this home does not need to go 5 menus deep, does not need to have access to these controls for this corner case. that often is not dealt with. Instead, we'll say, let's start with the simplicity that really makes the experience delightful and that doesn't make it too complicated for the average person.
Yeah, in fact, for that matter, a lot of times those complications actually get introduced even on top of things by the principal itself. The principal sometimes asks for some complicated programming because maybe they're more technical and they want a few features that are really more advanced. I've had customers who say that they want the ability to be able to adjust the surround levels on the fly in their surround system on their theater room anytime that they want. And it's really a feature that probably should be set and forgotten and not touched on a regular basis. So it's also our job to then come in, consult, and steer the customer to understand not only what is best for them, but how to achieve their goals, their needs, and to make sure that they're not overcomplicating the system, both for themselves as well as other users that would be in their system as well.
Absolutely. And over-engineering is a thing too. We talked about programming, but over-engineering in a lot of times can kind of wag the dog. So if a system ends up being, designed and engineered in a complicated manner, it's going to end up frustrating down the pike. And so we try to avoid that and say to ourselves, just because you can do something, doesn't necessarily mean that you should.
Yeah, like an iPhone, for example. While it is very cool that you can control your entire home from an iPhone, technically, should you? Is the interface just simply too small to be able to do an entire home's control in there?
Yeah, or even the iPad. And I get it, like-minded people might disagree, but generally speaking, having an iPad for your home theater remote, not a good idea. It's better to have those tactile buttons. And so we will, push for that, as your trusted advisor.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we use iPads every day throughout a property. We just don't use them for TV control per se, because I don't believe that a person should be staring at a screen when they want to change the channel on the TV. Additionally is, should you really control everything? Do we need to control the sprinkler system, for example? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Do we need to control the fire pots that are going down the driveway? They really don't need to be individually controlled. Or, anymore, we've got LED lighting that has color changing capabilities, and that's very cool. But that comes with a variety of 65,000 colors. Do we need to give the customer the ability to have 65,000 color choices? Probably not. So these are some of the limitations we want to make sure we put in place.
Yeah, and it's just the idea of the programming using intelligence to drive function, whether it's some of the monitoring aspects that we talked about, or using a concept, called round robin to intelligently select sources. Brad, you want to explain that?
Sure. Yeah. So round robin is something that we kind of have cloned, but round robin is this concept. And I think, again, if some of you have had this experience in the past, in a lot of the larger states that we're in, there may be 10, 12, 15 or more DirecTV boxes, and there may be that many as well, Apple TVs and Rokus and any number of other choice options of source selects for their video. And so instead of giving the customer an interface or a remote control that now has to have 30 choices for a room just to give them everything, we institute intelligence to be able to actually say, we're only going to have one option for DirecTV and one option for Apple TV. And our code in the background will automatically select which next one is available that's not being used at that time. So we can leverage adding in some intelligence to give their user experience an easier process and an easier way to go about things.
Yeah, and so finally, as we're talking through this, you can see we're kind of creating this, juxtaposition between, what improper design is with lacking a ton of usability and intuitiveness and practicality. And we've got some examples that have been cycling here, Brad, that show just that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there are some other features that we've done many times that we were guilty of this in the past, especially as early programmers. And so in homes, for example, one of the examples that comes to mind is we used to think it's really cool that since we actually are the first people that have the ability to do really great, animated graphics on a touch panel, let's do them. And so we started animating the graphics on the panel. And that involved the fact that we said, hey, we can actually animate your logos. So the CNN logo and the NBC logo can all have a little bit of a spinning icon. It's very cool the first time you see it, but you leave that on the panel for more than a week and the customer would drive them crazy. So, we find that there is things that while they may be cool, that just usually comes down to trying to have some reserve and making sure that you're thinking about the practicality of it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember we had two customers that come to mind. One had a fairly extensive, car collection, and we did animations of the cars driving across the screen in the homepage mode. He loved it, probably still does. But that's a lot. We had another customer that wanted to do an entire Egyptian theme. complete with buttons that look like, fires burning and pillars. And that's great. We don't see that as often anymore because I think we're just, so overwhelmed. I would just say, generally speaking, with user interfaces, we just want to get right where we're going. So we need to think practically here.
Yeah. And so, one of the areas that's really important for that practical thinking is the web rule. Web rule typically says 3 clicks or less. And some of you may have experience with that, but that even gets annoying. If we're going to a website and we want to find our location, we usually want to get there in 1, 2, at most 3 steps. You don't want to do any more than that. And so all of our user interfaces follow that same rule of thumb. And then as well, we're always thinking, is this the same user that's going to be using the system, or is there going to be multiple users? That's a really critical aspect. And then we have to contemplate, like, how do we attack that? Do we, what about favorite channels for each user? Do we want to make it, something where they log in ahead of time, where they have the ability to access them quickly? Do we default the panel that's in a specific room to that user because they're primarily the ones using it? So there's a number of thought trains that go involved in that as well.
Yeah. So moving on to our team, we have a number of different team members we'll just briefly highlight that kind of tells the story. But thinking about user interface, which we just spent some time talking about some of the pitfalls, here at Profound, we have a design team, we have a creative director. Our creative director, along with our other design team members, spent a lot of time thinking about user interface and customizing things based upon what the user's journey will be. We even do different test group or group functions where we'll pay people to review our designs and give us feedback on that.
Yeah, I remember early on, we used to go to the mall with our user interfaces and actually hand them to somebody and get a rating on how simple it was for them to get from one point to another. So literally, this was, 18, 20 years ago that we were doing this. And additionally, when the next step for us is the programmers. And of course, everyone's got programmers, yes. We're a little bit more partial to that because there's certain drag and drop GUI type software out there that I don't usually consider programming, but our programmers are true programmers. They're people that went to school for computer science. They are extremely skilled at what they do. We've got a whole team of programmers that literally just write modules and just write core code. And then there's a team that are actually putting together the individual projects. So we've got a whole team of people that are focused on trying to make sure that the most important factor to the customer, which is really the interface and their interaction with the system, is handled in a way that's extremely intelligent.
Yeah, and we have professional project management. And I think that makes a difference because given our experience in this industry, there's a few different disciplines that come together, which we mentioned. But project management also, obviously involves the architectural side, the construction side. And then also, because these systems are so complicated on the technology integration side, it is very much a custom programming project. And so we have that experience as well. We will devise the plan for the user interface and these flow charts that we have, and then work with the estate manager or the principals to just make sure, just to validate, that this is going to work for them. And I think it's interesting to kind of give a commercial kind of, corollary. One of the commercial accounts that we support is MetLife. And with MetLife, we've done a number of rooms throughout the entire world. We're very familiar with doing complex software development and producing Gantt charts. So when we come into a project management engagement on a large format estate, like I said earlier, we know how to handle it in the proper way, much like a large commercial deployment.
Yeah, and we're also able to then, of course, leverage this experience of doing multiple sites for customers. A lot of customers have multiple homes, maybe across the world. I've got customers that have homes in Israel and all over the world, that we can then create that same interface. So wherever they are, it's going to operate the same way. And I'm going to take a second here to show you a demo really quickly of what a typical UI looks like. And so it's popping up here now. This is a typical UI for us. Now we've got literally, in fact, at one point, I think we were actually offering customers about 100 different UIs, because our graphics design team was creating some really cool things. And what we found is that there were some standards for the way that we would find the chart work the best and work the easiest. And so we jumped off from that. So now all of our UIs kind of have the same format and standard because we found them to kind of be the ultimate way that everybody loves to interface. This UI, as you can see, has palm trees on it. Palm trees can change to whatever the customer may want. The colors can change a lot. In fact, those palm trees on some of our jobs are actually, we have customers who say, I want my artwork up there. So we'll actually take the artwork. We will have our creative team go in and format some of those images and put a little bit of a shadow behind it so it looks like it matches as a part of the design, maybe mute the colors a little bit, and then put it in there so that it matches. And some of that artwork then can change on a regular basis. So there are touch panels that are sitting on the wall in the house, which is really an iPad at that point. changes artwork on a regular basis. So looking at this interface, I kind of have a simple main page dashboard here with the word great room, house control, camera and security, and utilities. Top right corner on this one has a room select because it's set up for the purpose of me being able to change it to whatever room it's in. All of our UIs are designed this way, and sometimes we hide this button. But if I go into room select, for example, I now have the choice to change this interface over. So if for some reason I wanted to change it over to, say, the billiards room, and I go back to my home page, it says billiards now. And that will now be defaulted to the billiards room. I'm going to set it back to the great room right now because I'm going to use that as our example today. And I'm going to start with the home page here. So I've got great room, house control. If I select great room, this is the quick jump into everything you quickly want to do in that room. This is going by that web rule of 3 clicks or less, that I've got a quick screenshot here of all the audio options in that room, all the video options in that room, all the lighting options, and HVAC options. Very quick. And we can change this to 4 tabs, 5 tabs, 3 tabs, whatever. We can spread it out if we've got more sources. And all these sources are dynamically built, by the way. So for example, when I look at something like video and it says Great Room Blu-ray, the Great Room Blu-ray exists in the Great Room because it's local there for the customer to put a disc in. So if we were in the theater room, it maybe would have the theater room Blu-ray, but it would not have the Great Room because it's not local in the room. I've got all my music options, as you can see, with Music Server, XM, AirPlay, and then we can put in some favorites in the bottom, which depending on the customer and what kind of favorites they like to listen to, we'll throw favorites again to make that process really simple so they don't have to drill into the music player and go to Spotify and go to their playlist and hit play. They can literally just push one button and it will take them in. And we would then also take that same kind of a concept and we put that on lighting keypads in the house. We'll put that on the remotes in the house. So when a customer wants to turn music on in a room, it's a simple one push on the keypad and you're done. Looking at my video options, again, I mentioned earlier about round robin concept. And so I've got options here of DirecTV, Apple TV, Great Room, Blu-ray, and cameras. Really simple options. Now, we talked before about not wanting to give the customer the ability to, well, not necessarily not wanting, but we don't primarily focus on your primary interface in a room for watching TV being an iPad. Because the idea of staring at a glowing screen to be able to select something, to me, is just not intuitive. To pick up a remote, feel the tactile buttons, to know where the channel up and down is quickly without even having to look at it, to me has a tremendous amount of value for a customer. But in the application that we might want to route video to multiple zones or route video in this room, you always have that option. So if I go into my DirecTV, for example, I've got all my options in here. I've got my options for my favorite channels, just like we've talked about in the past. This gives me to the example that on the left side, you'll see the word home, back, great room, the source that's selected in that room, and then the volume control and power. Those are always static. They're always there. So a guest, no matter what page you're on, you know what's playing in the room, what room you're actually in, and you've got your volume control and your power off to shut it off quickly. And then I've got my home button that takes me back to the home page, or my back button that goes back one level. So I go back one level to this screen, and it's very, very simple and intuitive. If I've got more lighting systems than, lighting scenes than the typical, I can just simply scroll. And so I just drag my finger on this and I can move it back and forth and select my scenes. I've got my HVAC control again, just to quickly be able to raise the temperature, turn heat on, turn auto on, whatever I want to do on the fly. And then I've got options on the bottom for more controls. If we need to go into advanced controls, we can do that. And so that it just gives you the ability to kind of expand on this. So I'm going to go back to the home button. I push home in the top left corner. And now I've got house control. So house control is the place where if I don't want to control one room, I want to control multiple. We'll just show how intuitive this is. And particularly the hard part to do this intuitive is doing this intuitive in a large home. And so, what oftentimes we'll incorporate blueprints and we'll show some examples of that. And sometimes we have just simply room names. But at the bottom, you'll notice that I've got lower level, I've got main level, I've got upper level and rec center and outdoor. So I can jump around to all of them depending on what I'm trying to control. And if I'm in the main level and I want to turn on multiple zones, I can select as many as I want at once. And maybe I want to turn on Karen's music in that room, I select it. And you'll notice that it also defines where Karen's music is playing. And so any interface in the house that you go to will see that Karen's music is playing in the breakfast room, the dining room, and the foyer. So you're not going to step on top of somebody if you're trying to route some additional music sources at that point. I want to shut everything off. I can select them and shut them off. If I want to raise and lower the volume, I have it really quickly on the fly right there. So I can raise and lower volume really quickly. I can mute the room really quickly. So everything is right at your fingertips. You're setting up for a party, you're setting up to entertain guests, you can do that. We of course can build scenes as well, but this is a simple way to be able to go through and make that adjustment. And then I just power everything off. Now I want to control video in multiple rooms. I go to my video section. I got the same kind of an interface where again, it's room names and I can just jump back and forth between the floors. It shows me where it's playing. So if you remember in the great room, I turned on DirecTV. So great room is defined on that. In the top right corner, it shows the DirecTV is playing in there. Now, lighting and shades, we start to incorporate blueprints. Now, we use blueprints for certain things and other things we don't. For guests, blueprints can be a little bit more confusing. So room names oftentimes are a little bit easier, but we go into here and I can quickly see at a glance what rooms have lights on and which don't. If I want to go to the great room and turn lights on, I just select the great room, and now I've got all my scenes in there. Really simple. Hit my back button. I'm going to go up to climate control. And again, I've got climate control, which gives me a quick rundown on what rooms are where. The foyer is at 70 degrees, the breakfast nook, and so on. Again, I can jump from floor to floor and see different things. And so I go to the foyer. Now I can make an adjustment for that. I can, set that all set to go, turn the fan on, turn the heat on, and it's very, very simple. I go back, and now I'm going to actually hit home and go back to the home page once more. Cameras and security. Now, when we build this little dashboard of 4 options, it can be 5, it can be 6. But we build this based on what are the quickest things that the customer may find valuable to get to. We don't want to give them too much. We want to make it the simplest possible way to take them through the process. So cameras and security on this customer maybe is a really high priority. I've got the option to be able to show which doors and windows are open, closed, and locked based on the blueprints. This is the biggest challenge that I see in some of the big homes that we're in, is that it's time to go to bed at night and I don't remember which door it is, which one's left open, how do I run around and quickly shut them? Well, now it's a simple glance. You can look at it and say, okay, everything on the lower level is closed. This level, I've got some rooms that are unlocked. I need to go lock them. If it's part of an access control, we can actually incorporate that right there to lock them as well. If I want to see cameras, I go to cameras and I've got my options for cameras that are going to quickly pop up. And so I can jump around this. I can make this full screen. I can have a nanny cam. If there's somebody at the front gate, it will automatically pop up here and you can actually buzz them in. And then lastly is your typical keypad that you would have with your alarm system. So, it gives us the typical rundown where we can arm and disarm our alarm. Really simple. Again, back to the home page, utilities tab. Now, utilities tab is a very general tab for us. It's kind of where we just stick everything that we're not sure what we're going to do with it, and we want to have some quick way to get to it. So pull and spot control, if it wasn't a priority item for the customer, it's now listed here. If we had the fire pots, maybe they're listed in here. If we did something like weather, or weather station, whatever it may be, those get kind of put into this place. So I have the ability to run through here, adjust all of my stuff on my pool system really simply and quickly. And then, of course, there's a clean screen button as well. This is always a big area. We've got, estate managers that are responsible for the teams that you have, and they've got to be able to clean the screens. Well, to hit the clean screen button and have it blank out the screen where you're not going to push buttons, that's extremely valuable. And then this is the really big page that I want to go over with you guys, which is the house management control page. Now, this is a smaller version of it. Typically, we make this a unique interface just for the estate managers to be able to go in and see the system and really see the health of it. And now we offer a service where we will monitor all of this for you and then proactively handle issues. But as well, one of the other options that we put in here, the details to be able to see what the health of the system is on the fly. As we've mentioned before, we're very thoughtful in our approach on how we design and engineer systems. So everything is designed in a way that it has the redundancy in how we control devices, but also the ability to be able to monitor and know whether those devices are on and off, even down to the level of things like a satellite TV box, like a DirecTV box. So I can see here that Allen's satellite 3 is not communicating because the sync button is showing red. So I could actually just quickly hit the power button and recycle the power on that device. Maybe it's because the power is off and that's all it is, and that's what it's showing there. Maybe it's because there's an issue, but we have a separate connection that will go to that device that will actually pull the power from that device and do a hard reset of that device. And we can do that for every single device in a home. So it makes the quick snapshot of understanding where the system sits from a health perspective a really easy and quick process. And then lastly is anywhere you're at, you'll see a power button. So top left corner, bottom left corner, we've got a power button there as well. If you remembered on any of the other pages, we had a power button. So if you wanted to shut the house off, the system off, we can give multiple different types of options for this, of shutting off the room you're in, shutting off the entire house, maybe setting a scene because you're going away. But we've got options for that everywhere you go, because again, everybody thinks a little bit differently on how they control a system.
Great. Now let's talk a little bit about reliability. That's kind of where we started today when we talked about this concept of I just want the system to work. But something we hear all the time. We get a lot of phone calls here, I guess fortunately or unfortunately for the customer, but a lot of people calling in are saying, the system's not working, and as it relates to our approach, that has to just do with some of the natural aspects of technology and building in redundancy.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, redundancy is one of those really big areas that's really important for us. And I'll give you a little bit further rundown on that as we go. But the most important reason that redundancy is important is because of the industry average of where we're at from a reliability perspective. Unfortunately, the industry average is about 84%, which is terrible. And it baffles my mind, but we've seen this literally for the past 20 years. It's been very consistent with this 84% reliability of systems and technology.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's like the big secret, and ours is more like 95%, but we'll explain.
Yeah. So why not 100%? That's always the question. Well, because there's things that are just simply out of our control. For example, there's devices like Apple TVs. We love Apple TV because it gives us a lot of value as an end user. We use them at home, and all of our customers use them at home. Roku's are the similar example, but with that Apple TV comes the fact that it's literally a $200 box, and that $200 box is mass made, and it just will fail. It will have a time where it fails. There's sometimes devices that we can get that are slightly better. Like we don't typically interface with Sonos because again, Sonos kind of has some of those same criteria. But when we're trying to give the customer the best experience, we've got boxes that we can put in that are comparative to Sonos that offer all the levels that we need. It still has all the same features that are offered by Sonos, but we have the ability to control it. We have the ability to monitor it and know if it's on or off and know if the power is having an issue or know if it's failing and all those kinds of things. And we also have that ability with a lot of our stuff to be able to go in and actually say, I can manage that device on a core level, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later. Another one of those areas that we always see is cable boxes. I mean, we get cable boxes for free from the cable company. We don't have control. So things are going to fail. And that's one of the first important things to know is that we put in as much as we can from a usable perspective on reliable technology, but there's going to be pieces like Apple TVs and cable boxes in the system that can fail. And so that comes down to how do we resolve that?
Yeah. So for us and, the enterprise approach to the network with Cisco Meraki, many integrators, strangely enough, will say something like, well, we don't handle the network. Well, we embrace the network because we have to, and we've, boned up and have the certifications to back it up. But just starting at that layer, monitoring the network, we can deliver quality of service. We can prioritize certain packets and certain types of traffic. We can ensure that the video, which we'll get into this later, and audio, which are now just digital signal paths, are being properly prioritized. And then we can monitor ports on switches to make sure if technology starts to fail, we're aware of it. We can automatically reboot devices when we find that they're offline. We can even do that with the cable modem itself. Mm-hmm. So you layer all this on top, and what you find is that the lack of reliability of the devices is always there or was always there, but a proper technology partner is going to take these certain pieces and parts, and while it might be a $200 Apple TV you can pick up at Best Buy, you add a layer of whatever it would be, a few hundred or dollars, $1,000 in peripherals to monitor it, and then you've just changed the experience altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we've got well, Kevin will talk about that a little later, but we've got some back ends into some of those devices like Apple TV that really bring a tremendous amount of value, but it no longer becomes a $200 Apple TV because of that, and with it comes a much better experience. So, one of the really big focuses for us, as you will always see in everything that we do, is that we're focused on reliability. We're focused on how do we create a reliable solution for guests. So that starts in my mind with the foundation, and Kevin touched a little bit on networks. We're going to talk a little bit further about that in a bit here, but power is the first step to that. So power problems are one of the number one things that we do tend to see as the starting point. And so we engineer systems with proper power conditioning and proper battery backups on all of the devices, no matter where they may be. I mean, I know in California in particular, we deal with tons of brownout issues, especially in the summer as people are kicking air conditioning on.
Yeah, and in Florida, we have customers in Florida because of the shallow water table, that creates power issues as well. And so moving on to the network is another key component. We're going to kind of tick through this list. We focus on the enterprise network. We're not looking at, Pack Edge or Ubiquity or Ruckus. We're talking Cisco enterprise level networking. And don't get me wrong, I've had Ubiquiti, tested it at my house. Didn't fully like the experience. Didn't really think that it delivered on all of the complexity that we want to run through that network. And so that's the kind of network that we bring to bear.
Yeah, Kevin brings up a couple really good points there. I mean, the enterprise is the key word there for sure. Number one is that there's a lot of people that talk about networking, and enterprise is really the key of providing a network solution that is reliable. Additionally, with that is, the network is really the Achilles heel of the entire system. If you think about this, if your network goes down, nothing works. Your cameras stop working, your heating and air conditioning doesn't connect to the system anymore. You can't control it. Your lighting system has a problem. Obviously your audio video goes down at that point. Your web surfing goes down. There's just so much pain that comes from a network going down. And so that is one of those areas that we heavily focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even to the point that I'll just say one more thing and I'll move on to the next point, but with the enterprise networks, being able to configure your VLANs, which I won't get into the detail, but distinguishing different networks for different types of traffic and for security purposes, being able to handle setting up a VPN properly, and then being able to put different firewall mechanisms in place. My goodness, the things that we've discovered with networks that were managed properly, we can do that as well. But maybe moving on to the next point is just proper cooling. Heat will destroy technology, and I've seen it. Different systems we've taken over where someone was trying to do maybe what I would refer to as a poor man's decentralized lighting system, and they mounted a bunch of lighting keypads in an attic that was subject to maybe 115, 120 degree weather temperatures. And that's just going to destroy those keypads, which it did. And so what we do is, just as a design basic, is centralize the equipment, monitor the temperature, provide adequate cooling, and to the extent that we need to break the system into subsystems, do the same thing in those areas to avoid that killer, which is heat.
Yeah, I can tell you some ridiculous stories of things that we've seen in the attics of some of the homes. Homes in Santa Barbara where you've got this cheap, Linksys switch that somebody bought from Best Buy that they have dangling between two Cat6 cables across the attic. There's no way that will work long term, and nobody frankly even knew it existed, which is part of the other problem with it. So the next area that we talk about is redundancy, and this is another area that really contributes to the idea of creating a reliable solution. Everything that we design and engineer is based on redundancy. It might be redundant network connections for the ISP, for the internet provider. So we give the ability to say that if your cable modem goes down, we roll over to some other one. It might be redundant hard drives in the camera servers. It might be backup Apple TVs for when one possibly dies, that we can switch over to another one without having to roll a truck, or without having to disrupt the person from having that class that they're trying to do with their instructors. So we're always looking at redundancy as one of the key areas to creating a foundation for somebody.
Yeah, and to that point, and moving on to intelligent programming, that's another form of redundancy. So we don't just make the device work, when a person hits a button, yes, we expect it to work, but behind the scenes, we're making sure that if there are, in this case, multiple ways to send that command, that we're doing so that command can then be sent, and then we're verifying it so that the user can be assured that it's working. And if that doesn't work, we have a subroutine that, like we mentioned earlier, may reboot, the network router in many cases from the local service provider to make sure that the system just keeps working. And that's just a function of intelligent programming.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we have run into this a lot. In fact, a lot of times I'll get called in to do a walkthrough with a new customer or a prospective customer, and they go to show me their remote in the room, and they pick up their URC or RTI remote or whatever, or even their Crash Time remote. They push a button and the TV turns on, and maybe they even have audio, but they've got no picture, and they're not sure why. And a lot of times, hey, the DirecTV box never turned on, or the cable box never turned on because it powered off because of a power anomaly or something on those lines. These are some of the things that we see on a regular basis. And one of the other examples that comes to my mind is that we've learned ways to be able to, if for example, if we control a DirecTV box via IP, we can go directly to favorite channels without having to punch a number. So for a CNN example, instead of punching 202 enter and having a delay between them, we literally can send a command and it instantly switches pages. But that IP control does not work when it comes to trying to make sure the device is powered on, and it doesn't work well for channel up and down. So we've actually got multiple ways to control that device so that the user interface, the user has a really simple way of going about it. They don't think about that. They don't care. They just want it to work. And that's what we put in the background with our redundancy and our intelligent programming.
Yeah, and so moving on to proper installation, we bring those same concepts in that area where we're looking for redundant methods from an install perspective and just bring proper practice to that area. You know, we're not going to let a, IR bud be hanging out in the wind. We're typically going to do IP or RS-232 control. Everything's going to be wire tied or Velcroed and looking proper. It's funny, we just started supporting a new customer in New York City, and we're going to do all these upgrades, and we're out there and we're like, Mr. Customer, he says, what about my security camera surveillance system? And we said, this is it right here. Like holding this disjointed package of wires and bail-ins and power supplies that are dangling. And so work very hard to provide, again, we're kind of talking about redundancy over and over again, but the reliability really that comes from putting things together. And it rolls over to, like Brad mentioned, the Apple TV. Through an affiliation with Apple, we can run a software, a VPN type software, mobile device management to be technical, that can help us assure that the iOS updates come in a managed way through the managed services offering that we provide in a predictable manner, and one where we can handle that for our customers who don't want to be watching something, at late night or early in the morning and have a device auto reboot because that thought process wasn't taken. So we bring that into our installation and our service offering as well.
Yeah, and that same software that he's talking about, the management software, also allows us to be able to plan that experience out for the customer. So we don't have an iPad that the customer is using for checking their email at the same time, which then is going to conflict with the reliability of the system and how quick they're going to be able to connect to it. So we try to minimize that as well. Another area that we look at is, how we're actually powering all the devices in home. I mean, there's devices everywhere. Yes, we have devices like a TV room, and there might be a piece of equipment behind that, but all the cabling for that gets ran back to the head end so that we can control one single environment, or maybe it's a couple of rack locations. I've got some homes that have, 18 to 20 racks in them, and they're all kind of positioned at 3 or 4 locations around the home. And those applications, we might say, hey, we're going to control these 4 applications, but we don't have to control every room in the house's environment. To try to cool that, to try to provide battery backup and power conditioning in every single TV room is problematic. And it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and so looking at monitoring, and we talked about monitoring a couple of different times. At this point, we provide that remote support. Sometimes, older Apple devices that are brought onto the network can create IP conflicts. We've seen issues where ports start to go bad on the devices. We can monitor that. We even monitor the quality of the strands or the connectors that form the actual termination on the wire. And this is just a way that we carry that all the way to the device level. And if something goes wrong, we'll issue a ticket internally, triage that issue. If necessary, contact the property manager or estate manager or even the principal. But that monitoring goes a long way in dealing with the redundant or the issues that technology provides.
Yeah, and along with that monitor, actually, it brings up another thought that I had. I mean, one of the areas that we've been helpful with is monitoring even some of the staff members. We've had staff members who were running illegal movie server download, servers at the properties, and we're able to notice that. We can actually see that, hey, there's a lot of bandwidth that's actually happening all of a sudden in this one area of the house, and inform somebody and have them be able to go check it out and see what's happening with it. We've experienced a number of applications like that. And for that matter, one of the things that we deal with a lot, especially when we walk into a new customer, is that they'll have an inexpensive camera system. And those inexpensive camera systems, unfortunately, are inexpensive for a reason. What many of you may have not seen is that there is a number of camera systems that come from China that are hacked, that are accessible from the Chinese government on the back end. And so those devices get subsidized from a cost perspective so that people have a financial interest in putting them in their home. And now all of a sudden, all of that data is getting dumped into a Chinese server, both audio and video, for them to be able to look back at it and peruse later at a different point and then search. And so we can actually monitor and know that there's devices that are reporting data out, way too much of it. So we can kind of keep an eye on those types of things as well. All these things are really things that are kind of focused on the idea of foundational approaches, things that we do to try to make sure that we start with a good foundation. And frankly, this, along with the next thing I'm going to tell you, are really the keys to making sure that we have reliability at the 95% point. Every time that we have to drop a truck, it's costly for the customer and it's a pain in the butt for the customer as well. When an Apple TV dies and they don't have a choice but to wait till the next day till the AV tech can come out and fix it, or a couple days later, even worse, that's problematic. And so we want to be able to resolve those issues within seconds, typically, and or for that matter, give you as well the ability to resolve those issues. So when we get into the next step for us, it comes down to engineering the system appropriately. So we talked earlier about this. We're not just selling products just to sell products. We're not selling a product because Yamaha gives us the best deal, or because Crestron gives us the best back end spiffs. We're doing it because it's reliable, and we actually go through the process of testing every one of our competition out there to make sure that we're not missing something, so that we're experts on the industry and understand what is the most valuable thing to be putting in.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important point. This idea of cutting edge versus bleeding edge. And believe me, we live on the, a razor's edge sometimes with the technology that's coming out, what we're challenged to do, being enthusiasts, but then also trying to support our customers. But we will not really put the stamp of approval on it until we've tested it. I've been in this situation even recently with customers where a new technology has come out that has been much anticipated. And there's maybe even been plans in the estate around that technology and making use of it. And I'm videoing how it works through the user interface in one of our warehouses, and then sharing it with the customer and saying, just want you to be aware of this. And that's really saved, our customer, saved us to not just be, agreeable, but to be this technology partner that's going to represent this issue, as if it's our own, and say, no, let's wait on this one. Very important.
Yeah, that's really funny you say that, because I'm sure my wife hates it, to be honest, because we've got all the technology in our home to test that we are wanting to see if it's going to work reliably and well enough for the customers. So she deals with that pain, unfortunately. But you also bring up a good point, Kevin, that one of the things that we talk about as well is voice control. So this is one of those areas that what Kevin was just mentioning, that we test technology and make sure that we're putting it in when we know that it's reliable. Voice control is one of those areas that everybody wants. It's very cool. We've been exposed to it early on from when we all had Siri on our phones and we start talking with it, but there is nothing worse than voice control not working well. And I would never want to take the experience that some people experience while they're driving down the road and they try to send a text message using Siri and it doesn't work right. And then they're fumbling to try to correct the message, or they sent something wrong. I would never want to be a contribution to that in someone's home at that point. So we held off on voice control for a long time to make sure that it was not only reliable, but also that it addressed the privacy concerns, that we weren't sending out data that shouldn't have been out there, and that we know that it works well. And so voice control is one of those areas that legitimately, we're going to actually talk with the house manager in a few minutes that we have here, but it's something that we recently did an upgrade on this other house, and we still didn't even pitch them voice control yet because it's so fresh on our plate, and we're just still not at the point of trusting it yet, that we're just started doing it now. So
yeah, Brad, to interrupt that, speaking of that, Alexa, play Nickelback.
That's always nice. How many people, raise their hands, actually have Nickelback playing in their room right now? If you have an Alexa, I'm sure you do. So, and then finally, the last area here is consistency. There's nothing than going from room to room and having there be a different approach. I've got customers who say, "Oh, do I need to spend the money on this room when I don't use it that much?" That consistency is important. And Kevin, do you want to talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, so we'll challenge ourselves and really our customers, although not needed too much, because we know we've been there where we're shown one panel in one area, the main house, for example, one in the pool area, and a different user experience, maybe even close, but not close enough. Very frustrating. And so we work to standardize the user interface so that when you get to your vacation home or onto your yacht or wherever you're going next, that there's that uniformity in the engineering and ultimately in that user interface.
Yep, absolutely. So at the end of the day, what do we provide? That's really the big question here. Obviously automation, but not just automation. I mean, automation is really a buzzword these days. There's so many people that provide automation, as we just talked about, even with Amazon Alexas and Google Homes and all of them. And then, of course, there's the competition in the space when we talk about things like, Control4 and that type of a thing as well. What we do really from an automation perspective, other than voice control being closer to automation, we tend to take technology and just make it simple to use. We box it together in one simple interface to make it easy for a customer to use. So we're taking all these advanced boxes that all talk a different way. We're figuring out the best way to make them control in the most reliable way, and we're putting them on a simple user interface.
Yeah, and audio video, although we more broadly consider ourselves an IT company, audio video is a big part of what we do. And anymore, it looks nothing like it did just a few short years ago. Everything is a leg on the network. All of the sources are being communicated digitally. And if they're not native digital, they're being converted to different, over different baylins, transmitters, receivers, and then having to be managed at a very high level to be able to provide that adequate quality of service on the network. That's something that many people can't do and have significant quality of service issues. And so doing audio video these days is doing IT.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, again, don't misunderstand that what he said there. We started off as a technology audio video company, and that's what we are. But what we know today is that is networking. That is IT. Any device is IT today. So the network is something that we found to be extremely important. And so probably about 12, 13 years ago is when we jumped into it full force and said, we need to get all of our people trained on networking to make sure that we are on top of this and that we are the best at what we do when it comes to networking. And that's paid off in wonders. I mean, if there's a company you're working with that says, we don't do the networking, that's a problem. And that usually means that the quality of employee is not good enough to do programming and to do networking both. And it takes a level of a certain level of quality to be able to pull that off. There's a lot of devices in a home, and I mean, I don't live in a large home myself, 3,000-ish square feet, but I still in my home probably have 1,000 devices on my network. And I think in some of the mega homes that we're in, we're talking 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 devices at minimum on their network. So it's not just simply supporting that network, but also the bandwidth and the traffic and managing how much, that experience that the customer is going to have when there's 6,000 devices transmitting data and you've got 4K cameras sending camera data to the server and then trying to surf the internet on top of that, you're going to have problems unless you do that appropriately, unless you break that up appropriately and know what you're doing. So there's that. And then there's also the side of it that comes into security. Data is one of the most valuable assets that we have, our personal data. And so protecting a customer for that is really important. And anymore, we've got nanny cams connected. We've got solar systems connected, shades, obviously our security system, our generators, doorbells, audio, video, all of our computers and our Android and iPhones, all of these things are connected, including some of the kitchen devices these days are connected. And so, this is both exciting, but it also can be very frightening if not handled appropriately. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. And Brad, I think you're being modest. You probably have 6,000 devices on your home network since you're such an enthusiast.
It might be right.
But getting back to the network, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of items that are happening over the network these days. So it's a very big priority for us. I mean, to the point that when we do our quarterly or annual business reviews with our customers, we're evaluating the network. In some cases, we're in partnership with IT companies. There's about 200 IT companies that Profound works with across the country. And if we identify, and I just did this recently in a large estate home in New Jersey, about a 35,000 square foot home, the firewall itself had just expired, out of sale, out of support, no security updates. And the same was true for some other updates. And so that's the frightening part. There's the exciting part and there's the opportunity part. This environment that we're in now where the devices are getting smarter, the traffic that's happening, the real-time updates, but these are things that we need to be aware of and manage properly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. It's crazy the things that we see when we go into some of these estates, because you've got, we work with obviously, high net worth individuals. And so we've got a combination of people that are in the entertainment industry, but as well, we've got CEOs of companies and we've got heads of state. And to see the amount of, lackluster that they put towards our network, it always blows me away. To see how exposed they are to the outside world, it always blows me away. So when you see somebody, if you've got in your house, I should say, something like SonicWall or Logitech or Ubiquiti or Arachnus, any of those brands, PackEdge, Access Systems, not Access Cameras are decent, Access Systems, anything beyond that you might see at Best Buy, heaven forbid an Apple network, you definitely do not have an enterprise level network. And there definitely needs to be some consideration there for sure.
Maybe moving on to subsystems we provide. And this is a brief list. We could go further today. We're just kind of introducing ourselves and talking philosophy of how we operate. But shading systems, both existing and new builds, design and engineering of that, access control and surveillance, which Brad will get into in a moment, lighting systems, both retrofit and new design, and then also phone systems.
Yeah, and as Kevin mentioned, surveillance is one of those areas that we're really, really proud of. It's one of those things that we definitely differentiate ourselves from a lot of the other guys out there. And as well, this also goes back to our commercial and government experience. A lot of the employees within our company, because of working on high-profile government jobs, hold various clearance levels, and we are exposed to understanding why that's such a high priority. And so we've been able to leverage taking information that we've learned and our experience in that space and bring that as well to our high profile customers to really offer them the best of class of quality products when it comes to surveillance. So we're actually going to show you a really quick video that should just take a moment here.
Powered by Kratos, Profound is offering a unique safety solution that detects and prevents intrusion on your estate before it even happens, making us world leaders in advanced residential security solutions. Here's how it works. The network system is installed and securely monitors the vulnerable areas of your estate. IP cameras use custom analytic software detection to interpret visual data, such as unwelcomed visitors, license plates of vehicles, and knows the difference between an animal, bug on a lens, and person to avoid false alarms. The custom software tracks movement within protected zones, analyzes the event, and if needed, creates an alert for our live guard. Threats are presented to intervention specialists in one of our state-of-the-art monitoring facilities. And within seconds, we are live, and the level of threat is assessed by a live guard. Then, a live, personalized audio warning is issued.
You, in the mask with the flashlight, stop now.
And authorities and estate managers can be notified. If the threat is more urgent or escalates, family members are then contacted to get to a secure location before the threat even enters the house. Extending your home alarm system to your property line to protect your family with personalized protection, advanced intelligence, and giving your loved ones advanced warning of imminent threats, offering your family comfort and peace of mind from robberies and home invasions. Profound Technologies, delivering advanced surveillance and security protection.
So why is this valuable? This is valuable for a number of reasons, but as it's stated in there, this expands the coverage of your alarm system beyond the actual burglar alarm that covers the actual physical building. This covers the property as a whole. So you have an advance warning before anybody ever gets near the home that they're on the property, that they breached the property, and then you can respond to that appropriately. And this leverages a handful of different things. It leverages analytics, which is one of the key areas that's important. So again, going back to that whole intelligence thing, it's not just a dumb security system that says, oh, you got broken into, let's go back and look at that footage after the fact so you can feel bad about it. This is using that technology to say, I've actually got a threat that happened. Let me tell you real time what's going on and let you figure out and we can figure out what to do about that at that moment.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to touch on before I talk about the concept of replacing physical guards is that, as Brad mentioned, we have quite an extensive background in government, both DoD, Department of Defense, and intelligence. And one of the projects that I worked on personally was the U.S. Supreme Court Network Operations Center. So in the basement of the U.S. Supreme Court is the police department that just serves the 9 justices and the court itself. And so great project. But one of the things that I can say is that some people want guards, as they have guards there, and just bringing this back to the estate home, some principals want guards, others don't, because for whatever the reason, they might just be private persons or just don't want the static of people on site. And what I want to say is, just from our experience with the technology that we have today, just properly implemented and designed surveillance with remote guards, and then also the analytics obviously is very important. You can get the same, probably better quality for sure, surveillance than live guards standing or sitting and staring at screens all day. And for not that expensive, I mean, maybe the cost of another luxury sports car payment, and that's here today. And that's tremendous peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it actually really values even when you have guards on site, because having a guard stare at a screen and then catch every event is almost impossible. We've had many of customers who have 3, 4 guards literally working at the same time, and they still miss when some event happens because it requires human interaction to stare at a screen. So even leveraging both at the same time and having the ability to utilize this technology and then let the guards into their live, or even not having guards, are both valuable. We think that there's value in guards no matter what. There's definitely one of those scenarios that I think is important for some customers and necessary. But the other question we always get when it comes to these is, do I really need to actually have this monitored by an outside company? I don't want the intrusion of having someone have access to my home remotely and see this. And so, let me address that a little bit. I mean, number one is that guard doesn't get the detail. The remote guard doesn't get the details about seeing your cameras until there's actually an event that the software in the home has determined to be a viable event. And then it sends that data to the guard so that they can determine what to do with it. The other thing that's really important here is that, especially as an estate manager, I'm sure that you don't want to be somebody who's having to stare at these cameras all the time. It's a full-time job doing that. And I'm sure you don't want to be somebody who has to respond to every event that happens and every leaf that falls. And as we talked before about the advanced analytics of this, it's smart enough to know that, hey, that's a bug on the lens, not an actual person that's 30 feet away. It's able to knock out some of those false alarms that normally we find estate managers, when that are responsible for the cameras, would be jumping at those events all the time, or a tree blew because the wind's really rough today, or whatever it may be. All that stuff gets taken out of the equation. So you're no longer a slave to the camera system, and at the end of the day, our customers don't want to be slaves to the camera system either. We don't want them to live in fear. We want them to enjoy their life. We want them to, to be able to, go on without thinking about that at all, and have something intelligent in the background watching their back.
Yeah, that's great. So moving on, we're getting closer to the point where we're going to ask the estate manager. But before we do, let's talk about what is a technology partner. I mentioned this throughout our time today. At a high level, it's probably our primary belief at Profound Technologies, the idea that we will work very diligently with our fellow members here at EMC or anyone to work to the point that unless or until you feel better off working with us than not, we're not satisfied. We're going to basically provide for you what references, what information, insight into our capabilities will make you feel comfortable. And it's this idea that we almost have a fiduciary relationship with the people we represent, meaning we want to represent the estate home as if it's our own. We want to represent your highest and best interest as if it's our own. So there's maybe tactics that come into play, designing your system tailored to your needs, being able to make sure that we work against technology's failings and just generally looking out for your best interest. But technology partner is a huge belief for us, and we don't take it lightly. We hope it's something you come to understand and enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing we find as we kind of go through this is, estate managers and end users, they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. And I know that sounds really convoluted, but we often find that when we start working with somebody, we'll have customers who have had technology for 20, 30 years, and they just thought this is just the best that it gets. And that's kind of why we went with the subject we did, because we see it so much where somebody says, like, I just want it to work, and we feel like that's just not good enough. Like, it shouldn't just work. And so, we are here to try to help through that process. In fact, we actually have a program called, the First Start program that you can feel free to message us about. And we will come on site and give you a free evaluation of the technology in the home and understand where there's limitations, where there's issues, and no strings attached, no charge for it. It's completely free. And we can come in there and just kind of let you know areas that we see that are either weak areas or areas that could be improved upon, or something that is that will bring a tremendous amount of value to the end user. So our business at the end of the day tends to be solely based on referrals. We joined the Estate Managers Coalition, but this is the first time that we've done this. Outside of this, we have typically only gotten business from referrals from customers, because we find that a customer who thought that they knew the best because they've had technology for 30 years realized that it can get better. It can get more reliable. I don't need to wait for a technician to come out in 3 days to fix the system and not get a response back from them and all these different issues that they deal with. Technology can be very, very painful if it's not engineered appropriately, installed appropriately, programmed appropriately, and then, of course, maintained appropriately as well, which is our final step. So part of that as well is our ongoing service and support that we offer. Again, that we're a partner, as Kevin mentioned.
Great. Thanks, Brad. So now I'm going to move to the point where we ask the estate manager and do some questions from our guest, Jeff Siebert. Before I do, just a brief introduction to Jeff. He's been a friend of the company for, I think, about 18 years, worked very closely with Brad in support of multiple estate homes throughout the country. And Jeff, we're delighted to have you here. Welcome.
Yeah. And Jeff, just to as a quick further introduction, I'll kind of interview real quickly here. I feel bad that Jeff has been stuck on camera this whole time because this is his time. So this better be good, Jeff.
So
Jeff,
thank you guys.
Jeff, how long have you been an estate manager? What kind of estate, size, whatever? Just give us a rundown on who you are to kind of qualify who you are and where you come from.
Well, I've been an estate manager at the private residence just southeast of Cleveland, about 25, 30 minutes southeast of Cleveland for 20 years now. This November will be 20 years. And I've actually known Profound Technology for, like Kevin said, a little bit over 17 years now. It's been an amazing relationship.
Wow. So you started there when you were 18 years old then, right?
17, yes. And all of my gray came before I was 25.
All right. So give me a rundown, like how many people do you manage? What does that look like? What is your responsibilities within this site?
Well, the property is a 15-acre property. The exterior is very manicured. It's for a very high profile family in the Cleveland area. We have great water features, ornamental trees, ponds on the property. The house itself is upwards of 28,000 square feet. Indoor pool, huge mechanical equipment rooms, most of which the Profound equipment racks take up a lot of my footprint. We have large volume aquariums in the house. We have 15 full-time staff members that work for the family, full-time chef, full-time butler, nanny, executive staff, laundress, housekeeping, landscape crew, all work directly for the family.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And you manage most, if not all, those roles. So it's an amazing position you have there for sure. So prior to partnering with Profound Technologies, what did you typically find to be the most challenging part of dealing with technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. You mentioned something earlier in your presentation about practicing with our money. And we had one of our biggest challenges that I see when I talk with vendors, and even to be honest with you, some of the vendors that know that you're coming up to an upgrade, they really want to get in on it. And to be honest with you, because we've had long relationship with some of our vendors, we want them to be part of it. We want them to grow with us, but they really talk a good talk. And because we are trusting you guys, whenever you tell us something, we want to believe you. And we've been burned a couple of times. And so what we call it is they go to school on our money. And ultimately that ends up really hurting us in the long run. It gives us a system that we have to babysit constantly. And fortunately, we've had a situation to where you guys have saved us from a couple of those bad decisions along the way. It's why I think we have a 17 plus year relationship with you guys.
Excellent. So I guess diving further into maybe, because obviously you were there for 20 years. So 3 years prior to us, there was other people that were involved in this specific residence, right, specific house. What is your experience like with the past technology vendors that you dealt with there?
Well, it's very important to find the right person up front. And the principals here that I work for, they really wanted to have, give the local guy a chance again. They were wanting to keep their business local and their money local. And they hired a local AV company to install, like you were talking about, the Crestron panels, and not Crestron at this point, AMX panels. AMX. And it's a rather large undertaking. I mean, 25, 30 panels throughout the house, the network and all of that. And they hired this private firm to do all the programming behind the scene. And what was interesting about that is when the family actually took possession of the house in 2004, just shortly after that, the company went out of business. And we were actually nerve-wracked because we got all this equipment, over $1 million worth of equipment in the house, just waiting to crash. Some of it wasn't working. We were depending on this company that we had hired to be there for us in the long run, and they weren't. And probably about 3 or 4 months after they moved into the house, on one of the AMX panels, there was this message, and it literally freaked the principal out. She called me. She says, "Jeff, look at this. Look at this. Come here. Look at this." And what she saw was, she said, "If you want your system back, call us." And she freaked out, literally, almost freaked out. And I said, wait. Hold on a second. That's not what it says. It says, if we can assist you with bringing your system back, please call us. She made a phone call. She let me call the number on the screen. It happened to be Profound Technology. You guys saved us from quite despair. A couple of days later, Brad Fisher is sitting across the table from the principals. And from that point on, the principals would take Brad with them anywhere they go. And I'll explain that a little bit later if I have time.
Yeah, in fact, we've had a number of even situations where we go to trade shows together to kind of go over new technology. They actually flew into San Diego to get a chance to, view some new projectors that we were planning to put in for the property and things like that sort as well. Just from my perspective, I didn't know Jeff was going to tell that story, but from my perspective, in that situation, we were disconnected from them. We had no idea how to connect with them, but we knew that they were in a bad place. We knew that they had a system that was not done, and we were no longer involved because our contract was with the integrator at that time when we were a programming firm. And it was just shortly after that is when we started Profound Technology. So we reached out and said, "Hey, if you need help, we're here. We're here to help." And this is the only way we could figure out how to touch them. And it worked out, and it worked out great. So it was wonderful. So Jeff, just tying into this further, what has your experience been partnering with us, with Profound Technologies, and what are some of the reasons that the family has continued to work with Profound for the past 17, 18 years?
Excuse me, a number of reasons. One, and I say this as you're going to say I'm here, but technically when Brad Fisher sits across the table from the family, and he sits there and he presents a program like anybody else that's in the industry, he can talk a really good talk and sound very intelligible on the whole thing. And in the long run, you'll find out that he is. But what the family really saw was somebody who is a strong family man, a strong businessman, surrounds himself with the same, you didn't know I was going to say this, right, Brad? Surrounds himself with the same kind of people that builds the business. And then, so therefore, if he loves his employees and he loves his people, when he comes and he works at our place, he's going to treat the principals as family. And that may sound corny, but I'm telling you, that's what wins the heart of the principals that I work for. When all of his staff was here 2 months ago, doing an upgrade here at the property during COVID, the owners were a little bit skeptical about what's happening, but the extra precautions and stuff that Brad's team took whenever they came, the owners were telling me, how in the world can they get this much done and we hardly even see them? And these guys were working in every room, on every floor, very conscientious about how they work in and around the principals. It's just an amazing experience. And the demonstration they just showed all of you, we are currently using that dashboard system, and it is so user friendly. It's an amazing system. In the support, I got to tell you about the support. I am one of those guys that Brian was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. 5 o'clock Friday evening, I have to hit myself. I'm so sorry. I got to call Brad or Chris. Those guys are always willing to, and then they bring in a couple more people from the West Coast on the call, conference call, and they work out an issue, and they're always there for us. They don't just put it in and install it. They are there to support it. so that we don't have to babysit it. They are 100% behind me as an estate manager, which makes me successful.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And thanks for sticking to the script, by the way. I wish I could give him that kind of good stuff to say. I totally appreciate that. We have done a few updates at the house there since we started with them. And I'm always very proud as well of the fact that, like, we don't ever want to interfere with customers. We know that everybody's got a life, and we don't want to deal with, we don't want to be in their way. And so our team designed and planned. And so, for example, I remember clearly, and we've done this with many jobs, but I remember clearly out there, we, even with curveballs, have been able to get in there and change out the entire system in 2 to 3 weeks, everything, start to finish. In fact, I think the last upgrade before we did 2 weeks, we did a lighting system, the network, the phone system, all the touch panels, which was like 28 touch panels, all the remotes, which was many TVs, the whole theater room, everything in 2 weeks. And we had, I think, a little bit of residual time beyond that to do a little bit of additional programming over another week or two, but it was the lion's share of it was in 2 weeks. So it's kind of the way we operate.
Can I add something about one thing about security?
Sure.
There's a company that we hired. We perceived that there was a security threat on a couple of the family members, specifically the kids, a few years ago. So we hired the principals hired a private security firm to come, and one of their specialties was cyber security. They came to the property, they interviewed the family, they interviewed the principals, and they left saying that they're going to do two things. One, they were going to sit outside our facility and hack our system and let us know where the vulnerabilities were at. And second, they were going to interview all of the vendors and trades that we use to make sure that there were no perceived vulnerabilities with any of them. About a week later, we got a really good report card that we have vetted really good trades. And we do take pride in that because we want to protect the anonymity of the principals as well as their security. But the company's name was K2 Intelligence. They're the ones who are known nationwide for security protection. They came back and they told the principals that first, we sat out there and we tried to hack your system. We could see the network, but your network is so robust, we could not break it. We could not get in, we could not see it. So Profound Technology has built an extremely strong network, and you should be very happy with that and feel very secure. And they said that we are actually going to, we found out later that they actually pushed some business to Profound, which is actually a big pat on the back to Profound, because they're not going to put someone up and hurt their reputation if they're not going to stick it up. So like these guys are saying, network is extremely important. All of our systems, all of our bandwidth, all depends on the network. And these guys built an extremely robust network. And the owners are now building another property up in Maine on a lake. It's an amazing, another facility. The builder up there has his own security team, contractor. He has his own integrators, and the principals here hired him, but they're taking Profound with them, and he had to lose his integrator and his security team, and the principal's taking Brad, which that says a lot as well. So he's definitely won the heart of the family here, and we trust him 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah, and actually that builder is using us for other jobs as well, which is really great as well. So that's been a blessing as well for us. So Jeff, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Absolutely. You said, totally appreciate that and your support. So at this point in this place, we're going to keep Jeff on this because we want to open this up for some questions. So what I'd like to do is see if anybody has any questions. And if you have questions even for Jeff, feel free to throw them out there to him as well.
Yeah, so I have a few questions here from people that have come up in the Q&A crew. First one kind of ties right into what Jeff was just saying, which is at what stage of the construction should your company be brought into the process? Sure. And how much do you have to open walls if they're already closed up and things like that?
Sure, I can address that. Obviously, if this is a new construction scenario, as early as possible. It is one of those things that we've got, like there's a home in Orange County that we helped for that matter. As an example, it took 7 years to build a home. It's the largest home in Orange County. We were involved in that. We got involved 7 years before the house was completed. And not to say that we always need to be involved in that phase, but the sooner we get involved, the more interaction we can have. And frankly, the more we can save money as well, because there's areas that we can say, well, our experience tells us that you don't need this. You're going to have a dozen vendors that are going to all say you need this, 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 and this. And we don't provide heating and air conditioning systems, but we certainly know what you need in order to be able to provide the integration aspect of it. So you're not spending more money than you need on other things, on monitoring the heated floors and the radiant floors and the drive, in some of our locations are in snow, driveway systems that are actually melting the snow on the driveway. Number of things like that we can kind of come in with our experience and our knowledge to help with saving some bucks there as well.
Got it. Okay. Another question. Do you cover properties in Silicon Valley?
Yes, we do. Absolutely. In fact, we've got a number of jobs in Silicon Valley area in general. So,
okay. Great. So, Michael, if you can hear me, you can reach out to Brad directly and he can hook you up with that. Next one. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but with the expansion of Internet of Things, what can you do about IP security access, VPN to limit hacking and kind of keep the network secure?
That's a great question. There's a number of things we do. Kevin, I don't want to step on your toes. If you've got something to throw in there, you're welcome to.
Sure.
Do you want me to take this one or you want to take it?
Hey, you can take it. I'll take the next one.
Okay. So for example, one of the things we do, and we talked a lot about, Kevin mentioned VLANs, which is a more technical term, but VLANs are basically virtual networks within the same property and within the same infrastructure of physical hardware. And so in Internet of Things devices, we oftentimes will set up VLANs for those devices that only have access to the outside world. So it might be, a sprinkler system that's connected or a weather system that's connected or whatever, and they have limited access. So they don't have access to have a backdoor into the entire network. So you can't hack back into the house, number one. And number two, we're monitoring that to make sure that we don't have devices that are overly chatty. Like we don't have a camera system that's reporting back a bunch of data back out of the house and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, that's pretty much it, is kind of taking these different tracks of devices and layering them on these different subnets or VLANs so that they just can't get to anywhere else. And then obviously also putting the border router or the firewall that's going to be able to manage traffic coming in and see what's going out and manage any threats, and then also filter messages coming in. And then we get notifications that we manage for our principals having to do with that.
Great. So again, along similar lines, how do you control access on the network between the principals and the guests and the estate managers and the household staff to kind of quarantine different traffic in different places?
That's a great question. I'm assuming we're talking about access control, like the ability to be able to say who can get into a certain area of the property?
Well, that as well as network and who can access certain systems.
Sure.
And just who can access Wi-Fi in general and what exposure do they have?
Yep. So exactly what I mentioned a minute ago about VLANs is a very important factor. Guests and staff have a VLAN that's separate. The owners have their own VLAN that they have access to that keeps their information private. We've got customers that have offices in the house that they also then have a VPN connected to their headquarters, and those are a separate VLAN, so there's no backwards coming in from that. If there's a guest that comes in, we can give them a guest access. There's a number of ways of going about that depending on how complicated or how secure you want that to be. We can have something that hands out a password individually to that person. We can have something that's just open, but they only have access to the internet, nothing else in the house. We also have the ability to put like connections through. So if there's specific devices on one VLAN that need to connect to the other, we can make those connections just on those devices to keep that as secure as possible. And then as far as access control is concerned, I mean, I remember back, literally this was 25 years ago, we were doing access control systems. This was before Profound, but we were doing access control systems for government locations where basically we would have locked doors in between people as well from an access control perspective, where we could say if somebody has secure documentation, or in this application, let's say exposed to COVID, they cannot get within 2 door lengths of somebody who isn't, and that kind of a thing. And so we can actually implement some intelligent logic like that as well from an access control perspective. Access control, if you guys have any questions on it, it's very, very straightforward, but obviously, managing who has access to a home based on a keypad, a fingerprint, or a key fob. We usually try to avoid fingerprints as much as possible because they tend to not be as reliable, but there is options for that.
Yeah, we can even log Bluetooth device records within our network. So you can name them like I do. We have different people that work at my personal property, and I can know when the cleaners are there or when different folks are coming and going. It's just another security layer. And we can actually tie some logic to that too, having to do with their surveillance systems so that we can use that Bluetooth and device records to trigger different logic.
Absolutely.
So as you can imagine, a lot of our members already, their principals have existing systems with different kind of legacy equipment. Can you come in and in a sense, offer your superior programming on those existing systems, kind of reprogram them to run more efficiently and smoothly?
Yep, absolutely. And so the reprogramming factor comes to play. First thing I want to, and this probably is a question that will eventually come up, so I'll address it now because it kind of goes with this, but how long the system lasts. We often see people that try to push the life of a system longer than it should be. And so that correlates with this directly.
I think Brad's
we want to
locking
come in
up.
and make sure it's going to be something that we can provide the output they want to make
Yeah,
sure.
Brad, I think you're dropping in and out there a little bit.
All right, I'm sorry. Kevin, you want to take it while I?
No, it's just so good. It's just overwhelming all the bandwidth, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can take it.
I think you're
I
back.
think
you're back.
that with our approach and just kind of going where I think Brad was going, he can add to it in a minute. But, these systems only last for so long. Technology in really many cases, you talk about leasing from like on a commercial side, 5 to 7 years. But sometimes it's how fast this stuff's turning, even quicker. So a right perspective on how long technology lasts. I had a sweeter elderly person, called with a Crestron system that was, 20 years old and just didn't want to part with anything and just wanted to make it work. And that thing had really given its last breath a while ago, and just they didn't, call the time of death yet. So getting back to the question, Gary, about taking over existing technology assets, Brad had mentioned our first step, which is our way. We offer this to our estate managers members as just a initial free consultation. We usually would charge for this, but in that process, we would come on site and just do a basic, 1-day onboarding. And in that day, depending on how large the estate is, it could take more time. We'll have to talk about how to handle that. We will survey all the technology assets. We'll basically come up with a way of ingesting that into our help desk so that we're at least positioned to service the principals if they need something. And then we'll get busy on the work of figuring out, whatever that plan is. Oftentimes, we can't get those programming files. And even if we can, that can be problematic because, as we talked about, not all AV integrators are created equal. So we would be, talking about doing a tech refresh, which would involve maybe some new components, some of the security and monitoring that we've talked about, and then the professional services, the design, the engineering, documentation, and programming, just to be able to take that over. But that'll really depend largely. Brad, I don't know if you want to try and comment on that.
Yeah, no, and that's basically what I was going to get at. I mean, I was just trying to prompt the idea that the technology doesn't last terribly long, meaning, if we come into a system that's 10 years old and we want to take it over, we have to refresh it in some fashion. But outside of that, if there's a system that's there that we can take over, we definitely take it over. We can definitely take a look at it and add whatever refresh items we need to bring it up to speed, to add the reliability factor. I was just at a job the other day in Laguna Beach where a customer had a system that I was shocked was actually done very similar to how we would have done it. They had commercial DSP, so commercial audio switchers for their music. They had digital amps in the system. They had 4K switching already. And so we were able to come in and say, hey, you know what? We can reuse these components, but there was a lot of things they didn't like about their system. And so we said, obviously, we agree with you on those. Let's get rid of those items. Let's give you a better remote control for your TV because these are not great. And let's reprogram the system. And so we're able to save them the money, but leverage what items they have that are quality and good and still usable. And by the way, let me throw one more thing out there. When Kevin mentioned the first step, I know we're giving away some prizes here today, but
Yes.
the biggest value you're going to get as well is that, because when we do our first step, it's typically something that's a couple $1,000s, and we're giving that for free to anybody who wants it on this call. So anybody who wants a first step will come out and do it for free.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for your generosity on that one. I'm sure that is greatly appreciated by everyone on the call. A few more questions. Let's see. What happens if DirecTV needs to make a house call? Do you interface with those kind of people? Yes. and that kind of thing?
Yes, absolutely. So when we have a DirecTV visit, or even a cable modem is getting changed, or whatever it may be, any of those types of scenarios, yes, we will come out and we will be there with them. So we usually ask our end users or our estate managers to schedule that with us so that we can plan to be there during that window. And hopefully we daisy chain that with some other things that maybe you're doing. Maybe it's hey, we're going to dust the equipment off and make sure that we are kind of doing a preventative maintenance visit while we're there to save some time and money.
Great. Do you work with Savant equipment?
We do not. We know Savant really well, and I'll tell a quick story on this, but we are always checking out the other competition in the space as far as competitive products to make sure that we're not dealing with something that we should be putting in instead. And Savant's one of those products that we just have not come to yet. In fact, Kevin, if you want to touch a little bit on Savant for.
Yeah. I mean, so we know Savant from back when it was just like a twinkle in the eye of Jim Carroll. Jim Carroll was the president of Savant for a number of years. He's moved on since then, but prior to that, Jim ran an AV integration company in Osterville, Massachusetts called Avix. And they were my account at the time. We kind of go back in the history of our company. They were one of the large integrators in the country that were doing some very high profile projects in and around New England. And we did a lot of projects, AMX projects mostly, for Jim. And Jim said, I want to make this whole thing, a lot easier. And he came from a telephone switching background, and he talked about kind of just normalizing all the programming to make it easier. And so Savant, we keep an eye on. What I can say, and I don't want to get in a dust up with any of the members here today that like Savant, but with how we approach things, it just is different philosophically than where Savant went in its approach. It wanted to kind of centralize the UI elements and the programming at the platform level, which required of it, Savant, a lot of investment and really taking responsibility for those things so that integrators could more easily deploy robust systems. But what it did was it centralized that cost to Savant, and in one sense gave that benefit to the integrator, but it basically starved the customer to some extent. And you might even hear this with Savant dealers that, Savant's good up to a certain size because it's still limited. And so with where we go with wanting to build things enterprise, it's not just lip service. It's that we need to be able to be able to customize it more, to be able to work with different platforms that perhaps Savant doesn't use or hasn't got to yet. And that's just where we find we're just coming at it differently.
Yeah. And just to touch last thing on that is that there's AMX, when they were around, had a solution that was intended to make it simple to program. Obviously, Control4 is more of a simple GUI interface to program. Savant has that same concept as well. And Crestron's got Crestron Home. They all are trying to sell boxes. And so they're looking for the simplest way to sell more boxes. And I get that. I understand it. And I think it works for some homes. But it also comes with its limitations, and that's the bottom line. And so that's why we avoid some of those products.
Got it. Okay. Do you provide service outside of the United States? Do you do international locations?
We do. Yep, we do. Absolutely.
Great. Let's see. You mentioned that you don't work with Sonos, and someone's wondering if there's a workaround to that.
Not that we don't work with them. What happens is Sonos is intended to be sold at the Best Buy market level. They don't really care about custom integration at all. We've talked to them. They don't care. They're selling millions and millions of those things every day at Best Buy. So what do they care about the guy who wants to put 7 of them in his home and control it from a Crestron system? So, what we do is we've got ways around it. We've tested it. We actually have one in our office that we test on a regular basis, hoping that it changes and gets better, because I like Sonos. I think it's a really cool product. But what we do is we either have a jump to that goes to the Sonos app, and then it jumps back in the app, in the Crestron app, or we give basic control, or the better yet is that we will put in a box that is very competitive with Sonos as far as the feature set that it offers, that it still has access to the same, the same services, but it is fully controllable. We can put the cover art on the screen. We can do everything that you normally would want.
Great. Let's see. Someone's asking, is it better to lease or own a residential system? And if leasing, do you do leasing with continuous refresh?
We do.
Yeah, we do. That's an interesting question. I think that's an outstanding way to do it if you can get the leasing company to agree. I think that because these are residences, quote residences, but they are more like commercial enterprises, it's going to depend on whether or not the leasing company is going to do that. We do a lot of commercial leases as far as what we offer. I think it's probably a spectacular way to do it because you can do 5-year leases, $0 leases. You can tie the managed services into it. You get to the end of the 5th year, God bless you, take it all, or you could, buy it out if you want to. Frequently people will just upgrade at that point and do a new lease. So that is something that we could do. It's just going to have to do with the lease company's determination of whether it's commercial or residential.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. So I think, anyone else have any questions right now? Or I think this has been really phenomenally informative. Gotten a lot of good texts from people that have enjoyed this and really found your presentation extremely useful. So thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you, everyone.
Any more questions? I think we can switch over to our raffle if I think we're probably good. Yep, last few minutes. Oh, wait, there we go. What is the best way for people to contact you for a consultation?
Perfect. We'll put that information up and make sure it's out there. We have Kevin is handling consultations on the East Coast. I'm handling consultations on the West Coast. So we'll make sure it's up on the screen when we leave here. But
wonderful. And then everyone also Profound's up on our website now, so you can find their contact info there as well. So jumping back to the raffle, tell us what you've got today. You've got some fantastic stuff.
Yeah, we've got a handful of things. How are we handling this? Darla, are you handling this? I guess Darla's not there.
So I thought Gary was.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got a raffle of an Apple TV, a 65-inch 4K television, an iPad mini as well. So we're going to kind of go through these. I'll have Gary kind of do a random draw. Let's start, I guess, with the Apple TV, and we'll kind of work our way up.
Wonderful. So give me a number between 1 and 74.
Kevin?
48.
48. Let me see. 48 is Michael Armani. Michael, I'm going to open your microphone here. Michael, you there? Let's see. Michael? Hey there, Michael. Not quite sure what's happening with your audio.
Michael sounds like a 12-year-old boy.
Michael, ease up on the helium there, buddy.
Can you hear me better now?
That is much better, Michael. Congratulations on your Apple TV.
I've been having that problem for a long time. I need you guys to come and check up my system.
Well, it is Saturday after all, so no judgment, Michael. Everybody's got to survive the pandemic anyway they can.
Exactly. We're all just doing our best.
Michael, it's great to meet you. We will handle, by the way, for all the prizes, we can either ship them out to you, or if we're doing a first step, we'll bring it with and we'll meet you.
I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm in San Jose. That's why I was asking earlier if you have a Rockland location?
We will gladly figure that out. We'll work that out with you. Just send a message to me when we're done and I'll work it out.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, great, Michael. Congratulations. And then let's move on to our next one, which I guess will be the iPad. We'll save the big one for last.
All right, let's do number 770. Let's do 70.
70. Okay. Don Simonchuk, congratulations. Don, let me open your microphone here.
Hi. Wait, hi.
Hi.
We hear you.
Hi. Thank you. This was the most amazing presentation. I
Thank
can't
you.
believe it. Yeah, you guys are great. But thank you as well for the iPad.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you, Dawn.
Oh my gosh. And yeah.
Don, when we get through this, you can let us know what color you would like, and we'll do a 4K. I'm sorry, an iPad Mini, and we'll either bring that or we'll ship it to you, whatever you prefer.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Enjoy.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. And we are
All
doing our last one.
Last
here.
one, Gary. I would say
Big
let's do the number 60 because Bitcoin hit 60,000 this morning. So let's do
Nice.
60.
Oh, right on.
There we go. Okay, 60 is Renee Sandman. Renee, let me open the microphone for you. Congratulations.
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much. This was so exciting. Awesome presentation. I also had a question. Do you come to Texas or Montana?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, we've got a number of customers. I can say we've got a number of customers that have houses in Montana. So
Okay, because we just purchased a third property in Montana. So that is really helpful to know. And thank you so much for the TV. I'm so excited.
wonderful.
You bet.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Glad to do it. And where are you located out of? Are you yourself physically in Los Angeles, or what area?
San Francisco, but
Okay,
I manage 3 properties, actually 4. So one of them is under construction, so this is really good timing. So very, very informative. I loved your presentation. Really, really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Renee.
Well, guys, thank you so much. That was fantastic today. I think it was great information across the board and certainly some phenomenal prizes that everyone is thrilled to have. This was really great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to jot down or take a picture of on the screen our information here so you can reach out to us, and we'd be glad to set something up with you. Look forward to it. Look forward to working with everybody.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there, we have a few weeks off with no classes. Our next one is April 10th with one of our new security service providers, which is Crisis 24. So the invite for that will be going out in a couple weeks. And everyone enjoy your free Saturdays for the next few weeks and have a good couple weeks. Stay healthy. Brian, I don't know if you're still with us, or Joe, if you are and have anything to add, but I think, no, you're both, well, Joe's probably busy dealing with what she is. So thank you, everyone. Have a great couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you. Take care.
Enjoy, guys. Thanks again.